Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the first Gungahlin Community Council meeting of 2022. It seems to almost be incredible that we've reached 2022, but here we are. My name is Peter Alford. I'm the president of the Gungahlin Community Council, and I'd like to take you through our agenda for today, which of course at the instant I need it, I've lost. So from beginning, and we'll just pop that up. Just for a quick reminder for all of those watching, attending in person unfortunately is not an option, so having to check in is not an option, and of course we're not now required to check in, so that's a bonus. The meeting is live streamed on Facebook, and later on, almost immediately, the video for the meeting will be retained and made available online on the Gungahlin Community Council's page in the video section. So this evening, I'll give it a bit of an update. Obviously, this is since our last meeting, which was way back in December. We don't normally hold a meeting in January. Obviously, it's been a little bit of a quiet time over that period, but there have been quite a number of developments between December and January nonetheless. We're hoping to have an update on the Gungahlin. Sorry, just confirming, are everybody seeing my slides? No, I'm sharing the wrong thing. Right, now everybody's seeing my slides. I'm getting a thumbs up. Okay. So yes, the agenda is a quick update for me. We'll have an update from the Rotary Club of Gungahlin, their work on the Gungahlin markets, assuming all goes to plan. And then I hope we'll have a bit of a discussion about where to next on the Gungahlin Town Centre. I think most people in Gungahlin, certainly most people in government, ACT government, are well aware of our campaign to stop the sales of land in the town centre because of the concerns the community has in terms of getting the balance right of retail, commercial, residential, entertainment and community facilities in the town centre. So we'll have a bit of a discussion about that. So let me now just push on with a bit of a GCC update. Once we've done that, we're happy to take questions at the end of that section. Just by point of just reporting back on things happening inside the Community Council, as part of our December meeting, immediately prior to the December meeting, we had an annual general meeting, and as is normal, all the members of the executive, their positions are declared open and have to nominate for those, and as required, we held an election, which wasn't required on this occasion, and a new executive was put in place. A lot of familiar names, both myself and Vice President Henry Samuel are back in our position. We're very fortunate that Relitza was able to move from being a committee member into secretary position. Kofi Bonsu joins us as treasurer, and you'll see Kofi in the back of his car there. And Kevin Cox continues his senior role as a public officer. We also retained Darren March, Shah Jalani, Prasad Tipanyeri and Pradeep on our broader committee. So just muting those who come in. And also I'd like to extend a really big thank you to anyone who puts up their hand to do stuff in the community. And that includes particularly Cherie, Krishna and Sunita, who were a part of our Community Council executive last year and provided a great deal of enthusiasm and zest into our group. And we're going to miss them and hope that when their time permits, they'll be able to rejoin us. So I guess we can start on a really positive note. One of the really great things that's happened in the last year or two in Gungahlin is we've seen a number of community initiatives being launched and being undertaken. And one of those is an initiative of the Rotary Club of Gungahlin. They took it on themselves to apply for a federal grant. This is one of the grants that each sitting member gets to allocate, in this case, to Andrew Lee and the City of Fenner. And they've secured that funding grant, and with some fundraising of their own and some financial support from the Community Council, they've been able to build a rotunda down in the Yerraby Park And if you haven't had a chance to go and look at it, it absolutely looks terrific. Partly because the rains made the grass grow and it looks really nicely settled in already. But it sits in a little bit of a bowl, so it has that sort of amphitheatre feel, and it looks really great in the environment. And there's a terrific photo of three MLAs from three of the MLAs for Gungahlins, or three of the Yerrabi MLAs, all from different parties at the opening of the event, along with Relitza, our secretary, who spoke at the event, and two representatives from Rotary Club of Gungahlin. So really excited to be part of that, and really great to see this is one of many community initiatives that we're starting to see come through. Looking, it's already bookable, and I also think it's really important to say that we had quite strong support with TCCS, Transport Canberra, and City Services. They're the people who actually worry about the mowing of the grass and all the facilities that exist at the park, and they provided power and a number of other things like path connections for the rotunda. So our thanks to their support and the advocacy we had from we've had on for the Yerrabi area in generally led by Michael Pedersen, but with the support of, as I said before, all of the parties in Yerrabi. Just through the latter part of last year, there were some announcements made about policing. The police coverage in Gungahlin has been an ongoing advocacy item for the Community Council, and it's something that the Australian Federal Police Association have advocated for, to essentially put more police into the Gungahlin district. Part of the constraint on that is that the police share a joint emergency services centre in Gungahlin with every other emergency service, and there's very little space there. So what the government have proposed to do is relocate some of the emergency groups, specifically the State Emergency Service and Rural Fire Service, to a new facility in Mitchell sometime in 2022 to create more space for ACT policing, then to undertake some more master planning on what to do next. We've called for that planning to be accelerated, but more importantly, to actually add more police to the footprint. We, the Community Council, were asked to provide our feedback along with other community councils on how the last contract had gone for the AFP in providing services to Canberra. And I have to say, the very common message is the police do a fantastic job. We just need more of them, and we need a greater presence, and that's common to all parts of Canberra. So it's good to know that we're on message with everyone else. So my point is, we're just flagging things that we get asked about, that we are continuing to advocate on behalf of the community. So some of our regulars might remember we had the Minister for Transport, Chris Steele, speak at our May meeting last year and talked about a number of things happening with roads in Gungahlin and traffic planning tools and so on. We asked him to provide us some accident data, and he didn't actually provide that. So we followed that up with an email, a letter in October, saying, look, we've just seen this report by an insurance company, AAMI have published their crash index, and we were somewhat startled to see that in the ACT there were three roads that were identified as new and having more claims for AAMI than any other. And then, 3 of the top 10 were in Gungahlin, Gundaroo Drive, Anthony Rolfe, and then another location in Gungahlin Drive, Gundaroo Drive, Gungahlin Drive, and Anthony Rolfe Avenue. And so we said, well, is this data real? Can you provide us some real data? So in response to the letter, we did eventually have in December a meeting with the Traffic and Management Safety Group from TCCS, but we also requested that Chris Steele, or probably more usefully, representatives from TCCS could meet with the Community Council and probably with other groups in Gungahlin to discuss issues of roads and traffic and maintenance, things like mowing, things like broken this and broken that, and perhaps to invite other directorates to come along so we're all a bit on the same page. And I guess the dots there indicate we have still not received a response to that. So that's ticking over now with October. That's getting close to 4 months waiting for a response on that pretty simple ask. but like I said, we did meet with the traffic and management safety folk, and they have committed to, along with the minister, to come to our next meeting. But just as a sampler, they did give us quite a comprehensive document we will post on our website about the accident data they collect. And their accident data is quite detailed. They score the nature of accidents, fatalities obviously score very highly, injuries score highly, and then there are RDOs, damage, but no injuries. So they have this weighting factor to rank not only intersections, but also road segments. And just pulling out a little bit of data under the heading candidate locations for further examination, you can see that there are three roads, or three intersections in Gungahlin that rank in the top 7 intersections in terms of number of incidents, accidents, and so on. So, only one of those corresponds with the list from AAMI. So I think the data here is much more accurate. But it does highlight that we do have a disproportionately high number of problems with our road infrastructure here. I don't think that will be any startling news for most residents, particularly in amongst the town centre when, places like the intersection of Ernest Kavanagh and Nihinda rank as the sort of, over the last 2 years, the 4th most accident-prone site. The data is also presented in over 7-year periods, but of course, the Gungahlin streets tend to drop down then because we haven't had the same 80,000 plus population. So they're kind of the key items that I wanted to flag. There's a lot to talk about in terms of town centre updates, but I'll come back to that later. I'm just looking through here now, trying to check to see if our speaker has joined us. I haven't seen anything. Relitza, have you had any contact from Victor?
Not so far.
Or email?
Not yet. I'll follow up with him now. Hopefully we'll succeed.
Okay. All right. Okay, I'm just trying to. Okay, well, look, I'm happy to push on with the conversation about the town centre update. Really, what I want to do this evening is have a little bit of discussion with those who've joined about where to next. So let me just mute Dennis. Let me give you a quick timeline for what's happened over the past year. On numerous presentations and articles we've written, there's a lot of background to how we got to where we did in early 2021. And if people aren't able to find that on our website, please do contact the Community Council on Facebook or via email, and we'd be only too happy to point you in the right directions. So let me press on. So this is the 2021 timeline as an attempt to compress what has been a really large amount of advocacy across all of the members of the Community Council, in part initiated through just pure frustration that the way the town centre was developing, the mix of residential, commercial, office space, retail, community facilities and entertainment facilities really didn't seem to be working very well. And particularly in the last 2 or 3 years, every single development in Gungahlin has been, to summarise it, individual developments of hundreds of residential units and maybe 2 or 3 small commercial tenancies at the bottom of the building which never get occupied. There's, again, the Community Council, and I don't believe any residents are actually against a lot of residential development in the town centre, but there needs to be some balance to actually build services and other reasons to attract and retain people in the Gungahlin town centre, just like any other town centre. I think that's the expectation of most residents. And so part of the frustration there is that mixed piece, and Suzanne Orr introduced a motion in the ACT Assembly, which was passed, asking to improve the mixed use developments, this sort of combination of retail and commercial, and retail in the town centre, and seeking better engagement and better outcomes, particularly around employment with it. And that happened in February. In late April, the Gungahlin Community Council wrote to the Minister for Planning, calling for the sale of land in the town centre to be suspended. This is essentially observing that the amount of land left in the town centre was running out. If we keep selling it off under the current planning regime, we're just going to get more units, and we're not going to get the balance of the other things we think contribute to a vital and vibrant town centre. We followed up those letters with a petition, which was sponsored by Andrew Braddock, Greens MLA in Yarrabee, again seeking to stop the sales of land in the town centre, better economic development, a commitment to more employment, and improved consultation, a common theme in all of this. On the 6th of May, which some of you will note is only 2 days after our initial petition and very quickly after the call for sales, we had a written response from the CEO of the Suburban Land Agency committing to exploring alternate ways of bringing land to market. It's particularly to look at precinct models, so not selling one block at a time, selling groups of blocks, attaching more conditions to the deed of sale, the lease conditions, and in doing a much more thorough job of consulting with the community about their expectations. So that was a very positive response and very quick and very timely, which is in contrast to the rest of the response from government. Shortly thereafter, Andrew Braddock also initiated a motion in the embassy, again seeking better consultation and economic employment in the town centre, and some other aspects. So we had one petition, 2 motions passed by the Assembly about this. And when the petition was finally tabled in the Assembly, over 700 people had signed it. And that was only open for a few weeks. On the 30th of September, so we're sort of dragging through the year, an inquiry into draft variation 364 was concluded, and the committee undertaking that inquiry published their recommendations. Draft variation 364 proposes changes to the current planning rules that apply to the town centre. Some of the things that it introduced was increasing the amount of residential development at the expense of commercial, and a variety of other details which we've talked about endlessly, and we're happy to point you to. But there are a series of recommendations in that, and the inquiry was quite critical of the way draft variation 364 was prepared. The 19th of November, Minister Gentleman, on behalf of the ACT government, responded to the motions and petitions, and I'll talk a little bit about what we believe was in those responses. And just yesterday afternoon, Minister Gentleman, again on behalf of the government, responded to the recommendations of the inquiry. So it's been a very long and drawn out process, but we'll try and wrap this up and tell you where we've got to out of that. So as I mentioned, the Suburban Land Agency have responded very quickly and have undertaken to do a really deep dive. And they gave an overview and a bit of an insight on how they're planning to do that consultation at the December public meeting. You can watch that online. And they've been in contact with us about their early thinking on how that will be developed. That consultation will be developed. They're very much looking at a model similar to what they undertook for the Gold Creek Homestead, which had a panel which was briefed and given some time to think about the issues. And then the recommendations of that panel were actually put into the sale deed, so that when someone bought it, they were required to deliver against what the community wanted. So that's their current working model. And so we continue to watch that. In pouring through the responses to the motions and petitions that Minister Gentleman provided in November, there were, I think, 18 recommendations across the 2 motions, and about 9 of those the government agreed in principle to, which usually means not much. And apart from referencing the work that the ASLA had already committed to do, the only other actual things the government seemed to be committed to was to prepare a prospectus on the benefits of Gungahlin and the town centre to give to the Commonwealth Finance Minister to assist in attracting a federal government agency to Canberra, to Gungahlin, and to continue to monitor traffic flows and consider any improvements that might be needed. So that's not very convincing. Because one of the big bugbears of the town centre is traffic flow. various bodies in Canberra have been asking government agencies, federal agencies, to move out to Gungahlin for probably 3 decades. So why this prospectus will make a difference is yet to be seen, and I'm not sure how and when that will come forth, but that's their commitment. And then finally, in the response to the inquiry just yesterday, so this is really a pretty quick digestion of what they undertook there. There were 8 recommendations in the response to the inquiry. The committee's inquiries. There are 8 recommendations by the committee as part of their inquiry. They said we're going to remove criteria 43 and rule 44 from draft variation 364. I'll try and give you a flavour of what that actually means. Draft variation 364. In fact, the planning document is not easy to read. It's quite technical and talks about a lot of detail around how big footpaths can be and so on. They're going to do an undertaken assessment of commercial market potential. That's pretty disappointing. I think there needs to be assessment of the demand for community services, the demand for entertainment services, the demand for retail, because that's the challenge here. We want to get the mix right. They agreed to do better active travel planning. That wasn't hard for them to do. They'd already budgeted for that anyway, and that really is focused on cycle paths, and then improve some of the requirements for frontage of buildings onto as part of the draft variation. So just to give you a flavour of what that means, so the items that were proposed to be deleted, this relates to the mixed use precinct on the eastern half of Gungahlin. This is currently paddocks, where the Manning Clark light rail stop is. So a little map here, the sort of arrow through the middle indicates the light rail stops heading south. On the far left dot on the light rail lines is the Gungahlin Place stop, and the other dot is the Manning Clark Crescent stop. And the references here to blocks 3 and 5, section 231, are those 2 big blocks I've ringed. That green bit in the middle is the proposed linear park. And basically it says the rule was that these 2 blocks would be reserved exclusively for commercial use. But there was this criteria that the government could go and review this at any stage, which is this criteria in C43, and they've agreed that will be removed. So that's positive. And that also added a rule saying that rule 43 would apply until January 2024, and then if it expired, then the government could do whatever it liked as part of the indicative land release program. So it's good that came out, because that just gave a simple out to a new system. So that's kind of the level of detail that we're fluffing around with. But I'll come back to some of the substantive things we've found frustrating in a moment. I guess the other thing that guides all of this is the government actually publishing what blocks will be sold. And that's called the indicative land release program. And it comes out at each budget. At the last budget, it basically said, we really have a bit of a placeholder here. We're not committing to selling any blocks, because the town centre is subject to a planning review as part of DV 364, and there's an inquiry and the 2 resolutions of the Assembly they're trying to address, and they're going to consider that in the future ILRP. So there's going to be a bit of time and a bit of delay until we know how this plays out, and hopefully a lot of it will be informed by the consultation to be undertaken by the SLA at the precinct scale for all of East Gungahlin. So after that year of campaigning, we've got the 2 motions, we've got the petition, we got the responses back for those. We've had the inquiry into DVC 364. The text of that is quite critical of the government process, although the recommendations, if you look in the detail of what is in the recommendations and what the government's actually responded to, they really have picked a few pieces out of that, and that needs to be pursued. So the question is, where to now? What's missing? Is it enough? And so I'm going to try and throw a few things out there and get a bit of a discussion going about this. So one of the things that was unique about the Suburban Land Agency, and to be honest, their reporting minister, Yvette Berry, who's the Minister for Urban Development, is they actually called a meeting with the community council as soon as we had issued the call to suspend land sales. So they actually offered to speak with us about it, which again is not something the planning directorate or the planning minister chose to do. And they acknowledged that our community concerns are valid, and they were prepared to do something about it. And I guess our concerns as a community are that the town centre has not evolved as the government hopes, and in a lot of their responses from the planning minister, there's lots of "we hope this wants to happen" rather than articulating how things will happen. So acknowledgement's the first thing. The second thing is there are no incentives here to drive outcomes. All of the other town centres in Canberra were developed under the NCDC, who essentially enforced the construction of offices in those town centres and not in the centre of Canberra. And that's why there's a centre of employment there. It's because there was a stick that said that. So once the Gungahlin Town Centre began its development, it was after self-government and the NCDC had long gone. So there have been no stick or carrot incentives to drive outcomes in Gungahlin to get the same sort of balance and mix that we see in some of the other town centres. So there needs to be something like that. And it's become increasingly clear as we engage with the various groups that there needs to be more joined upness and more coordination between the government, particularly between SLA, EPSDD and TCCS, and probably community services and the other groups trying to deliver things. So I think we really need to drive hard to get a bit of a place-based approach to Gungahlin and force these directorates to sit down with us and say, well, these are the things going on. Do you realise that your active travel consultation is not even looking at e-scooters? Now, I understand e-scooters aren't necessarily active travel, but they also need paths just like bikes, and they need somewhere to be parked and locked up, just like bikes. So surely they should be saying things. So here's examples of things being undertaken by MLAs and consultations they're doing that not being joined up with the directorates, let alone the directorates not being joined up. So let's have a look at how this comes together. And then, all of the engagements that we see vary in quality from really good, like the Gold Creek Homestead one, to here's an online survey, tick a few boxes, very low quality, very superficial, isolates a whole bunch of potentially interested parties. So all of the engagements need to be of much higher quality and meaningful, so they actually can influence things. The last point I'll leave here is in reading a lot of the responses, and I suspect most people don't have the energy to read all of them, but there's a lot of repetition of things that this is how the way things are. This is the planning rules. It'll all work if we, it'll all be fine. But these same planning structures and rules really haven't achieved the outcomes to date. So just saying that they'll somehow change and get an outcome in the future, it doesn't seem rational. So there's kind of the key thought bubbles here. But I'm very keen to understand from others, if it's the community council spending our time in the right place, and what would you like to see more? So with that, hopefully people can put their hand up or put something in the chat window. I see Darren has his hand up. Darren, are you ready to go?
Yeah, hi, Peter. I was reading Minister Gentleman's response, and one of the things that really stood out to me was what you were mentioning about looking at other town centres and trying to have something that's similar. And his response was the ACT government agrees in principle to recommendation 1. This recommendation relates to the government undertaking an analysis of different types of commercial activity that could be undertaken in the Gungahlin Town Centre, and that this information be used to inform future land releases. But in the paragraph after that, he says, additionally, the ACT government has already committed to undertaking consultation and planning to develop a precinct planning approach to future land sales in the town centre. The important part for me is the next sentence, which says, we will look at the blocks along Flemington Road to the east of the town centre to achieve an appropriate best practice of mix and integration of uses. So, I mean, that concerns me a great deal, that they seem to have completely missed the point, and that essentially they're really only going to look at Flemington Road as the best practices of mixed use along those.
Yeah, I think that's, yes, a lot of that response is not very cohesive. I totally agree. Yeah, so one of the questions is, what do we do about that? Do we get down to the detail of the response and pick it apart? Do we demand a meeting with the minister? Do we, which I think is appropriate, do we just be critical in the media? It's hard to know what's going to have the most leverage. Simon Copeland.
Hi there. I am relatively new to Gungahlin, and this is only my second of these meetings. Cool. So I just wanted to I guess you asked for some feedback or some points about where to head next. I think from my perspective, following the community council, there's kind of two things. I guess some things that raise concerns about the responses. The first is that you said right at the start that no one opposes more housing in the town centre, but from my reading, almost everything that comes across from the Gungahlin Community Council comes across as opposing more housing in Gungahlin, and I think that's not a good approach. I think if we want to have a vibrant town centre, we need to have people living there, and it's actually important in a growing city that we can facilitate people, and we have the best transport link. It's the reason we moved to Gungahlin is because of the tram. We live in a townhouse here. We wouldn't be living in Gungahlin if it wasn't for that, and we wouldn't have been able to afford particularly to live in Gungahlin if it wasn't for that. And I know lots of other people in kind of my age bracket who see Gungahlin as a place to move to because of these kinds of developments. That doesn't mean I don't see the concerns about the kind of mixed use element of it, or the bottom floor mixed use. We live in just on Mapleton Avenue, and across the road from us, there's a mixed use development that has one shop that's filled or two shops that's filled, and the rest are empty. And there's something clearly going wrong there in how these are being developed. I don't know whether that is because of also kind of the economic circumstances that we're in terms of the COVID world and what that is doing to retail, what it's doing to commercial spaces. But I think and so I think we need to take that into account to an extent to see whether that will change. But I also think there probably is something about the quality of those spaces. I know ones that are along the way here that have cafes in them that they can't really have a full kitchen, which seems kind of ridiculous. So there's something going wrong there. So I guess I was just wanted to make a comment about the messaging around housing. I actually think housing in the town centre is integral to the growth of Gungahlin and should be, and kind of townhouse and sort of smaller, and decent, like high quality apartment town housing is the kind of place you would want in a town centre from my perspective. And then the second thing I kind of builds on that is one thing that I feel like I'm missing a little bit is an acknowledgement, or at least a clear message about what the community council actually wants in Gungahlin, and what is the vision of what you could see the town centre to be. There's lots of things that I love about the town centre. I actually think it's quite a vibrant town centre. Having grown up in Belconnen in my teenage years, where everything was centred around the mall, I much prefer the Gungahlin town centre because I'm outside a lot more. There's a lot more street frontage. A lot more of that, I think, is actually a really positive part of Gungahlin, and I would really hate to see it. I'd be worried about precincts that sort of develop a mall-like feature, because I think that would be a real not ideal. But I also understand that there's kind of desires for things like a cinema, which I understand has been delayed because of COVID reasons and those sorts of things. So it'd be what I'm trying to say is it'd be good to get a greater sense of what are the kind of things we feel like are missing, and how can we facilitate those things? What's the kind of the bigger vision for that? There are lots of things that I think were really great about Gungahlin. There are certainly things that can be improved, and across those big pieces of land, I think that's certainly the case. But I'd love to have a bigger sense of vision, something positive about what we want there, because then we can sort of the council could lead the agenda of that rather than constantly reacting to what you don't like or what we don't like.
Yeah, no, look, Simon, they're fantastic feedback items, and certainly we've had. There has been feedback that, and you can't stop. It's silly to stop residential, and the answer is agreed. The town centre for 20 years has always had in the plans a really high percentage of residential. But what's changed is, 20 years ago they were planning for 400,000 square metres of commercial. Then, as recently as 2010, it was 200,000 square metres. And then 4 years ago, it was down to 100,000. And so the point is, the opportunity to have a big space for office, it just keeps getting dwindled because no one wants to buy a big office block in Gungahlin because no one wants to rent a big office block in Gungahlin.
Yeah.
And so the trick is, like I say, I mean, how do we incent a big employer to come here? Now, it doesn't have to be a big employer, but how do we have in Gungahlin something that attracts and retains people? I mean, if I think of, Pacific Fair on the Gold Coast, it's a giant shopping centre, and now it's a mall. I don't like malls either. And one of the defining characteristics of the community of the Gungahlin town centre is that it's not a mall. That was something the community led in consultations in the early 90s and was reaffirmed in the last decent full-scale planning document in 2010. So that's not an accident. That was deliberate.
Yeah.
So the issue has been that last 3 years we've just seen nothing but residential. It gives nothing back to the town centre in terms of restaurants or better high quality retail. There's a shortage of community space throughout all of Gungahlin, so it's hard to find rooms to have meetings and so on. So it's all about the mix. It's not, we don't want residential in Gungahlin. It's in the town centre because it's obvious the town centres outside Gungahlin are going that way as well. So let's plan for it. But it's how do we get these things right, and how do we try and get that balance right? And if there's just back to your point about tenancies, a lot of them not occupied because the current planning rule says they can only be 200 square meters in size, which is quite small. And the reason for that is because the mindset was, we can't let these areas away from the centre of the town centre be too big, because then we won't be able to sell the big commercial tenancies, big retail and commercial tenancies in the town centre. So they've got this idea of a hierarchy, but because there's no big in the middle, there's not anything anywhere. So, but they're really good points, Simon, and I encourage you to keep making them on Facebook or email or here. It's really important we get that balance right. So
I know a couple of other people have that. Can I just have a quick response to a couple of
Sure.
points? I'm in the middle of making dinner, so then I'll turn my mic off. I just wanted to say, I appreciate the concern about the lack of officers. I guess I wonder whether we're in a situation now where the reality of office, the potential of officers is just so far gone, particularly following COVID, when that's the case. And when we have a federal government that particularly seems really disinclined to build offices, and I don't know what the ACT government can or could do to keep pressuring the federal government to do that, and that seems really difficult. And so, I don't think offices are the be all and end all of a town centre. And in fact, when more people are working at home, we would actually still have a vibrant town centre during the day, because actually the home has almost become an office in some ways for lots of people. The other thing I was going to say is maybe one of the points of things in the future is it seems like the quality of mixed use places is a key issue of concern, and that should be a focus of I think mixed use is a great idea, because I think that I don't live in a mixed use myself, but I like the idea of having a cafe or a supermarket down below from where I live. I think lots of people do, but the problem seems to be the quality of those commercial spaces and the capacity to have, and other cities do this. You can have a mixed use place with a JB Hi-Fi downstairs, or a whatever, one of those bigger places. So the idea that it's smaller seems to be a problem. So I think that having mixed use but sort of pushing that requirement for more commercial or more big retail, capacity for really high quality ones could be a really good way to get that balance right. That I think that could work.
Yep. Well, I encourage you to get engaged in all these consultations, and we'll hunt you down for your comments. Kim, I see your hand was next up.
Thanks, Peter. I'm really interested just to hear a little bit more, and it flows on from Simon's point too, in terms of the role of the federal government here, but also in terms of federal government agencies being a potential tenant. Where is there a federal government agency in Gungahlin at all? Or
in about 2 or 3 months there will be. The Defence Housing Authority was Senator Sid Seselja leading up. I'm going to say it's the 2016 federal election, but I may have that wrong.
Yes, no.
Leading up to that election, committed to move a government agency to Gungahlin, and that's why DHA are there. So back to my point around carrot and stick, you just said it will happen. But no, they're the only ones. And the challenge to sort of tie Simon's comment to yours is that it's not the federal government that decides where they build offices. It's the agencies. So, for example, the Department of Education, Federal Department of Education, recently put out, middle of last year, put out a tender last year for new office space, and they put out a map showing where the acceptable locations would be, which was essentially the parliamentary triangle. So they're choosing there, and there's two drivers for that. They want to be central, close to government, but also that's already where they are. And the idea that they would, imagine if the Department of Social Services, who's based in Tuggeranong, said, we're going to move to Gungahlin. Yes. I don't think the secretary would have much fun. I think he'd get a bit of pushback from his staff. So that's kind of the issue. But it's not like the government can't do something. The government offers the old CIT site in Reed to the University of New South Wales for a peppercorn rent. They're foregoing the commercial value of the land to be able to put a university on the site. And that's kind of my point. If the government is prepared to do something to get social impact, it's possible.
Yeah. And obviously my interest in sort of running as an independent is to try, for the Senate, is to try and think of ways that without the sort of party structure and with a balance of power in the Senate, you could positively encourage that sort of growth for Canberra in different areas of Canberra so that there would be that stimulation to the economy in Canberra. So it's really helpful for me to understand that sort of mechanics. So thanks for sharing that with me.
Well, much more where that came from. Vice President Henley, how are you? You're next.
Good, Peter. Thank you. It's good to see hear from different people, and that shows the election is coming up. So exciting times. So basically, for the last few decades, what I've been hearing from people is about, how Gungahlin has been betrayed because we bought the block thinking there's going to be a big commercial area there. It's going to be easy for the families so they can go and work and then come back home quickly. So let's ignore the COVID time for now, but the commercial areas are all gone, disappeared for no reason, and it's all become like a small blocks, and that's not even well planned, and it caused so much issues, including the traffic chaos that happens, and no wonder, based on the presentation, we can see we are rating the top 3, which is all part of this major problem. And on the 2019, GCC did a survey, and we asked the people how much of the remaining open space in the town center should be residential. We had the majority, like 60, almost 60% of people said no more residential in the town center, and and so that shows the enormous result. And it clearly shows from the the way we are having a lot of the surveys, and everything points to one thing, which we are missing the town is the commercial place, and there's retails are missing compared to the other districts. So that's the key thing. I think we should go ahead with one more survey to get to get the more exact figures. I do understand there's a housing need in Canberra, but it doesn't mean that you can, you can't just keep changing the plan, which you planned like 10 years back. There should be a different thinking, and the ACT government should bring some kind of incentives, which we've been telling them for a long time, to encourage the developers to build those commercial or retail places, because at the moment we don't see any incentives happening. So I think the survey stands still 2019, which gives us good guidance for what the people of Gungahlin want, what's the community want. I think we should republish that and go from there.
Cool. Thank you, Henley. Kevin, I'll see if I can just put up that chart that Henley had up a minute ago. Kevin.
Thanks, Peter. Look, thanks for all your work, Peter, on getting this and helping all this happen. I think the response from the SLA, Suburban Land Agency, has been really good, and I attended that little meeting with you earlier on this week, which was very positive. I think that they really do want to try and figure out what to do. But what they're going to need, of course, is input from the community. So we need to think of ways in which we can, everyone here, hopefully, will be able to participate as much as possible when the SLA is starting to ask for input. So I think that's really important that that we, as a community, get really engaged with the SLA when they ask, or as they ask for feedback. And the other thing so that's really good. And I think that they can come up, they and us can come up with some positive ideas as to what to do. There are lots of good examples around of mixed use development, for example. We know the ones in the middle of in Acton, and the new ones that are going in out Derry Flat Road. They're pretty good. So we know it can be done, and there are examples across the rest of Australia and of course across the world that show that it can be done. I don't think we should hope for federal government departments. We've got to look elsewhere than federal government departments for employment. They're not this. It's that horse has bolted a long time ago, and it's just not going to happen. So we've got to look elsewhere. Maybe in the education area could be one of the areas that we could start to push. The other thing is that I think it's really important that we, when I say we, I mean the community, not the GCC, but the community, have be part of the oversight of what actually happens, and that there does need to be a coordinating group to work all these departments and so forth together. Now, the government doesn't seem to be inclined to doing that, but we should be trying to get them to, because they have to arrange it, to get a coordinating body that has community representatives on that body. It's not just the SLA on its own, but a coordinating body that has representatives from the community, different sectors of the community, and also obviously from the government departments and the other areas. That's really important to have that oversight, and not just for the development of the town centre, but for the ongoing development of Gungahlin. But it's got to be done in some way that doesn't interfere with the. We don't want it to be a local council, but we want it to be feedback on the development areas, as opposed to actually collecting rubbish and all that sort of stuff. It's an oversight of what the developments actually get done.
Yep. All of that. Yeah. So I look. The next steps are challenging because we need to either organise, or the community needs to spontaneously come up with what we want, kind of to Simon's point. So certainly the simple vision from the community councils, we want a balance of services, just like any other town centre, to service all the residents of not only the town centre itself, but all of Gungahlin. And if we sell off all the land and it's all residential, then we're kind of stuck with that for the next 20 odd years. The same way that the northeast corner of the town centre suddenly went from being an office park to a collection of high-rise residential. Now, the high-rise residential, not that bad. some of it is pretty ugly, but some of it's not too bad. But the problem is it's not balanced with other things, and it was never planned for, and so the routes to and from it are not quite great, and it's impacted other tenancies like the childcare centre and so on, so on, so on, so on. So we just need to try and work for a more balanced approach. So, like I say, it's meant to be a discussion. One of the challenges of being a community council is being asked by the media and by government, well, what does the community want? And it's like, well, hang on, I'll just give all 80,000 people in Gungahlin a call and we'll find out. It's actually much harder than that. So trying to find a mainstream position to take is not straightforward. And so we highly value everyone and anyone's contributions, and it all factors into the subtlety and nuance of what we say and how we engage. So, all right. Well, if as everyone's probably well aware, I can keep talking forever. So I will pause if there are no other hands raised or anyone who wants to speak to this topic. We can pause it now and put it into sort of general discussion at the end of the meeting. But I noticed that Victor from the Gungahlin Rotary Club is online, so we can perhaps work towards getting him on, giving the update he's got on things that the Rotary involved with, particularly markets. And if people want to provide some comments, please do so in the chat, or again ping us, or we'll be here for a little while afterwards. So, well, just for the moment, why don't we park the conversation? And Victor, if you'd like to unmute and give us an update on where the Gungahlin Rotary Club is up to with the markets and everything else.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to talk to you about the Gungahlin Rotary Community Markets. Look, first of all, I'll start by saying that we've been trying to give these community markets a red hot go for the last couple of years, and we've been hampered and challenged by really bad weather, a bad spot to start with, which was out of the centre of the public eye, and more recently, as with so many things, the COVID lockdowns and everything else, and obviously it's been very challenging to get that going. Why is Rotary so keen to get these markets to work? I believe, in the same way the last topic was talking about what can we do with the Gungahlin Town Centre to make it a thriving hub, what we want, what we desire is to provide a focal point for our community to get together and mingle and be able to buy some unique things that you can get from a market. But it goes back to that community focus and something to on a routine basis go to. Hopefully we'll grow it to a point where there'll be some fruit and vegetable and sort of fresh produce going on as well, that people can make a regular to get homegrown stuff. But in the meantime, we're capable of catering for up to 65 stalls in our spot, which is behind Coles, next door to the East Lakes, Gungahlin East Lakes Club. It's a great spot. It's quite visible to a lot of the public that are going in and around there. And being a car park makes it a lot easier to get our stalls out there. So up until this point, we've been operating once a month, and we've been getting some feedback from our stall holders that once a month isn't regular enough for all of them to get a routine, regular customers coming back that want to get their products on a regular basis, because we've got people that are doing some amazing jams. In the past, we've had dried meats and the like, and they all like to have repeat customers coming back that rely on that. So the update. First of all, times have been hard for us, and because we're trying to be a focal community point, we've also now gone into partnership with the Aurora Gungahlin Rotary Club in the region, because we need to set the example of doing things together. And by us doing that, we can get everyone else getting in and participating, we hope. But the other part of that, and thanks Relista for prompting us on our social media presence, by having more people that are directly involved in the markets, we can get more social media presence out there as well through those folk, because we understand and we realise that our biggest challenge is getting the message out there that we're happening. So, yep, Aurora Gungahlin are joining us. And what we're also trying to do in relation to the feedback that we've had is we're going to start conducting our markets on twice a month. So we'll be out there on the 2nd and the 4th Sunday of every month. And that way we will be looking at giving that regular feature in the town centre there. And we have quite I would say we have about 40 stall holders who have been very loyal to us and regular. And we are confident that with the greater social media presence, regularity, and as people start to realise we're there and what we're doing, we will build it into that local community activity that seems to work very well in many other places. And we just don't want to give up on this.
It's awesome. There's been a few proposals over the years to try and get some sort of markets going, and location's always been hard. And I know that there've been a couple of go rounds with you guys on location, and it's good that you've got a spot. Is that the car park beside Wynyard House?
It's the government building there with the daycare centre. Yes.
Yeah,
so in between that and the Gungahlin, East Gungahlin.
Yeah. Okay, that's great. No, it's terrific. Look, it's terrific what Rotary get done. I've got there's no doubt a bunch of things out there that we can add to potential to-do list for Rotary. Okay. Anyway, I've got any questions for Victor? I see Henley's got his hand up, or is that first?
That's Kim.
I know. I do see. Yeah. No. I got that. I see who put their hand up. I'm trying to go in order. Henley, did you want a question, or was that just left up for before?
No. I do have a question and comment for Victor. Thank you, Victor, for coming tonight. And I know you guys are doing a great job where you bring community together. Which is great. That's what we need in Gungahlin. So the only thing I found in the Belcon and the market they had, there's people were smoking and stuff. So I just want to make sure that you guys, in the public place, there should be some kind of restriction or some kind of sign saying, no smoking in the region, because when I was, it didn't happen in Gungahlin, but I don't want this to happen in Gungahlin, because when we were in Belcour, the market, the same, the people who are selling stuff, they are smoking in one hand and selling product in the other hand. So we don't want those kind of things happen in Gungahlin. So I just want to, give you a heads up, just when you select those vendors and stuff, make sure you put as part of the policy. Probably you might do it already, but I just sort of bringing to your attention. Otherwise, keep the good work going. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Henley.
Any other questions? Yes, Kim.
Thank you. Yes, no, that sounds really wonderful community activity, Victor. And I'm just curious to know, with the forthcoming federal election, whether there's space and an appetite for sort of civic engagement on that front. So I'm not sure if you came in earlier, but I've put my hand up to run as an independent for the Senate, and I'm keen to hear from people and meet with people in community spaces. And so I'm just wondering, is there appetite for a stall with that before the election, or is it something that that you're only really wanting food and produce for sale?
Oh, look, I'll be honest. politics is a part of life, and it is part of our community. And if there's an opportunity for our community to go and speak to representatives or those who wish to be representatives, we have no problem with that. And so our policy to this date has been we will not pick any sides. We will give everyone an equal opportunity to do that. What we do ask, though, is that you pay for your spot. It's not a free handout.
I know that
you pay for your spot.
Yep.
And you do what you do. So we have no problem with that. It is our community.
Yeah, thank you. So I'll reach out to you separately, but I think that is a healthy approach. I mean, part of it is about saying that politics is a healthy part of the community and for civil engagement around those sorts of issues. So I'll follow you up afterwards, Victor, to find out how much I need to pay in order to be able to participate. Thanks so much.
It's not very expensive.
No worries. Thank you very much.
I thought it's expensive for politicians. Don't have the proof.
I mean, we're quite happy to take bigger donations. Look, you know, I will go back to the fact that the markets are not about us trying to make money. Look, everything that we get is handy, and we run our own barbecue, sell sausages, so that's where we get most of our revenue there.
Yes.
It really is about, you know, our motto is service above self, and trying to make a difference in our community. And if making a difference,
yes,
that's not connected to money.
No.
So our objective is to get that community spirit going.
Fantastic. All strength to you, Victor. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Kevin's got a question there.
Yes, and it's for you, Victor. Look, you guys make sure that you get involved with this SLA stuff. I mean, that's one of the ways in which you can really make a difference, is making sure that you get your communities and a voice heard in this upcoming stuff that's going to occur. So that's just a call out to you to make sure that you get engaged. And I'd also like to call out to Ashley Curlin. So Ashley, you probably know more about Gungahlin than most people. So let's hope that you're going to get involved with this upcoming review, or whatever it's going to come from the SLA.
Yes, part of the community. Sorry, I'm trying to multitask. And if one of my colleagues has the Facebook feed in front of them and can see comments there, it would be great if they could identify any questions that are being asked there. Yeah, I've got a couple of screens, but that's probably not enough to keep track of things. All right, well, look, again, thank you, Victor, for the work you do with Rotary and for Rotary clubs in general. It is much appreciated. And, you know, sometimes it's that gap filling function that, you know, someone should run markets, and it's, you know, often the Rotary group that's someone. So thank you for that contribution. Thank you very much. Now, I might have to sign out, but thanks for letting me have my say. No worries. That's why we're here. All right. Well, look, we've come to the end of our agenda today. The nature of the COVID world and Christmas and all of that has meant that we have a number of speakers who are very keen to speak. The guys developing the new big block diagonally opposite the post office, Transport Canberra City Services have said they'll come back. Minister Gentleman has indicated someone will come and speak to us about policing, I think in April. So there are a few things in the pipe relevant to our earlier discussion. But I would certainly be happy if anyone's got any further questions or comments around where we're going with the town centre advocacy, or indeed anything, if there are other issues that we should be spending our time on in Gungahlin. You know, this is a forum to raise that, or of course, you know, you can reach us through all the usual communication channels. So did anyone have anything to add to the town centre discussion and ways forward and strategies and alternatives, or do we want to park it at that and move on? Everybody's got to rush off and make dinner or eat dinner or chase a cup of coffee. All right, well, look, again.
Nothing from Andrew?
No, I've asked Andrew if there's anything from Andrew, and Andrew's chosen to let his announcements stand for themselves, and if people have questions about what he said, they can follow him up. But I guess I would make a point that Andrew has joined us. It's always great when the MLAs do join. I was asked on the radio this morning. Yes, this morning, about the role of MLAs. And I think one of the great things we've seen in the last couple of years in Yerraby is a lot of our MLAs getting a bit more engaged in local issues and promoting them. And Andrew has done a good job of that, along with Suzanne Orr and others. So thank you.
Yeah, Peter, can I just sort of add a couple of things there?
Most certainly, Peter.
Yeah, thank you. Obviously, as a neighbouring MLA, it's always good to see how active you guys are and really interesting discussions. But just something I know that you mentioned earlier in the meeting, Peter,
yep.
About the need for more policing in Gungahlin. You probably heard in the news today that Jeremy Hanson moved a motion for more policing across the board. And sadly, we have the lowest number of police in the ACT per capita in the country, the lowest funding per person for police, the lowest clearance rates for property crime, and the lowest satisfaction of people who had contact with police. So again, that's not on the police, that's on the resourcing. So your issue in Gungahlin, unfortunately, is Canberra-wide.
Yeah, look, I made that point when the other community councils spoke to the consultants who've been engaged to review the previous period of policing. And as I said, the general feeling was the police do a spectacular job when they're engaged. It's just we need more of them. Although the other part of that is the general feedback from the other community councils, including us, was that the community policing component, the preventative policing, the education and connection with social services to prevent crimes before they happen and to minimise people getting into situations where they feel the need to commit crime. That's an area that also needs further work, and that is a difficult challenge, particularly with the structure of policing in the ACT, which is sort of done on a contract basis. So
thank you for letting me join you again. Yeah.
It's open to all. It's just as long as we keep our conversations relevant to the topics at hand, we're all happy. Right. Just trying to do it. Okay, so I'm sorry. Ashley's made some comments on Facebook, which I am trying to convince my computer to show me, but it's proven to be a bit of a challenge. But one of the key issues, one of the topics we've had in trying to get out some of the subtlety here is it's not necessarily just about an office space. It's about creating a destination. We could have the best, most awesome, engaging park in Canberra as part of the linear park. It's how do we build rich value and get some return on investment in the light rail. People would come to Gungahlin as a destination is part of that. Andrew has his hand up, so I will toss to Andrew.
Yeah, I will just jump in and to answer your question, Kevin. I was listening earlier to the range of opinions expressed about the town centre, and that's very valuable for me to hear. I am, of course, perfectly happy to answer any questions people have. I just wasn't quite sure if we wanted to circle back around that conversation or not, so I'll leave that one open to all others. Otherwise, I'm happy to provide an update on some of the other goings on that I've been involved with in the Gungahlin region that don't involve the town centre. So what would you like to hear about?
I'm looking at all the people on video for an indication. Personally, I would like to hear about both. Yeah. We've got, we've only had a meeting a little over an hour, so I think any updates relevant to what's going on in Gungahlin, I think are interesting. So I'm happy, Andrew, for you to contribute something either about the town centre or about other things you think the broader community might need or want to know.
Okay. Well, I'll be presenting 2 petitions tomorrow in the Assembly. The first one's relating to a sludge pit, which is just near Moncrief and just across the road from Ngunnawal. I believe it was about over 500 people signed that petition, basically asking for the sludge pit to be relocated somewhere closer towards a landfill due to the problems arising out of litter, offensive odours and so forth with that. I will also be presenting a petition about the Gungahlin Skate Park, which is down near the Yarrabee Pond District Park. Some of the skaters from there have approached me, not just in terms of repairing some of the facilities, they would also like to see some upgrades in terms of getting more lighting there, so they're able to use it in the evening during winter, for example, and also increase the range of sort of jumps and activities they're able to do there as well. And that's been also well supported by the local community. I think they've got something like over 600 signatures. So I'll take great delight in presenting that tomorrow. I've also been working on Marbo Boulevard in Bonner. I'm not sure how many people have been through Bonner, but Marbo Boulevard is the main road that goes up the middle of Bonner. And it was at its time an example of water sensitive urban design, which, let's face it, it became a weed infested rocky ditch. So we've got trees planted across along about 1/3 of Marbo Boulevard, but we're also seeing to get those extended, plus also increase the amount of shrubs and ground cover that we can potentially bring in to make the amenity of that area much nicer. That also ties in with another thing I'm working on at the moment, which is, of course, trying to increase the tree canopy cover across the entirety of not just Gungahlin, but the whole of the ACT. Because as we know, tree cover helps prevent our suburbs from becoming too hot over summer, increases the visual appeal, increases people's health and well-being. So we're trying to find as many spots as we can to plant trees within public land, whether that be where a street tree has died, or whether we've identified a suitable location that we can do so. So been reaching out and trying to get as many trees as we can in the ground as well. Also, there's a proposal for a microforest in Casey, which is a good example of a community coming together to look into plant a stand of trees and other species of plants as well. So it becomes a thriving ecosystem where there was once just a patch of basic grass, as you would normally see in a Canberra sort of mow area. Coming back to the town centre, yes, there was the government response yesterday that was tabled. I responded to that in terms of saying, look, there's definitely some good wins in that, in terms of the commercial blocks will remain zoned as commercial. There is also acknowledgement of connections with the Yarrabee Pond area and also the precinct planning, but I was also very clear in my criticism of saying it doesn't do anything to address what Peter was referring to about getting that right mix of residential to other uses within the town centre. And part of the reason the government basically hit that limit is draft variation 364 was a very limited precinct code. There was only so much we could achieve by that. So now we need to pursue the other options, which you've identified before, talking about the Suburban Land Agency when it goes through the consultation process for those sales. That's something that is very important for the community to get on board, and I'll be watching very closely as well. There's also the indicative land release program. The next iteration will go through as part of the next budget, so I'll be working heavily on that to see what changes we can get to that to be able to make sure that we do get that right mix. And I totally acknowledge it in terms of there are a range of views across the community and also exactly what that right mix looks like. And that's a discussion we need to keep on having, but I can be fairly confident from the surveys that the Gungahlin Community Council has done in the past with the community, and also representations made in the past. Dial has been too far over towards the residential end. So how do we move that dial back towards incorporating other areas? And there's also some other pieces of the puzzle to come together. For example, there's the commercial needs study that was promised under the government's response to DV 364, where it's sort of looking at, okay, what can we bring in? The old days of clicking and dragging a federal government department into a town centre are unfortunately behind us, but there's still opportunities out there. For example, like the tech college that has been proposed. There is obviously appetite out there for commercial operators of various forms to have space in the town centre. So what can we do to encourage those? Also, I hope to see the, and a smart work centre, exactly. With COVID going on at the moment, lots of people are working from home. There has to be space here for people to hot desk, whether it be ACT government, federal government, or even private enterprises. So how could we potentially encourage that? We've got NBN here, we're meant to be well connected. It shouldn't be that hard. And it was something that was even promised back in 2016, but we've seen no progress on, which I am keen to see actually happen so that people can drop their kids off at school, come to work in the local town centre, go get a coffee or lunch in the local area, and they're never more than 5 kilometres from home. Why do we need everyone to leave Gungahlin to travel to the other side of Canberra in order to just be able to work?
Yeah. So I guess the point about creativity and part of the challenge is, I think, as everyone on the call is sort of nodding their heads, it's like, well, okay, what's the process and mechanism? What do I do? What website do I go to? Who do I have to visit? Who do I have to call? What do I do to make some of this happen? And it's either we ask the government to help, or you've kind of got to rally the troops. And maybe it's like a microforest on steroids. It's a smart work centre, which is sort of a bottom-up initiative. But of course, you need employer support for these things. So they're all good things, and I guess we're still sort of flopping around trying to find the mechanisms to carry them forward. It's getting very dark. I noticed Lynn Parry has her. Andrew, thank you for those updates. I was aware from a couple of other postings about the sludge pit. Skate parks had some media. I don't know if Darren or someone from the Friends of Yerrabee is around, but there seem to be lots of projects being proposed for the Yerrabee region. It'd be great to know if that's being pulled together. But Lynn's had her hand up for a little while, so I'll throw to Lynn.
Thank you. I want to get back to the topic of the land use in the town centre at Gungahlin. Gungahlin, I feel, is ignoring seniors as a possibility in the area. Canberra overall has got 26 RACFs, that's residential aged care facilities, similar number of ILUs, which is independent living units. Now in Gungahlin, there are none. There's one that's going to be built out at the Grove, but there's only one. I live in an ILU and it's only an ILU in Crace. There is no RACFs. Consequently, when your partner needs to go into an RACF, you've got to be able to leave the town centre. Now, if we had more land allocated in the town centre and said, this will be for an ILU and an RACF, that would bring a lot of employment to the town centre, because an RACF needs tons of staff. Then I also think that in that area, we need education, training for the staff to work in aged care. That possibility really hasn't been explored in Canberra, and I think it should be. Canberra has one of the worst ratios of beds for seniors in ILUs and RACFs in Australia. When my mother, who's 98, finally gets around to dying, her bed will barely get cold before the next person's in it. I have 1 week to clear a room out. There's a queue, a big queue in Canberra. People are leaving Canberra to put a person in an RACF down the coast, down in Wagga. Canberra doesn't have enough of them. That's all.
I 100% agree, Lynn. And ever since I've been elected, I've been calling for an aged care centre to be in the town centre. And for a couple of reasons, in terms of, one, Canberra has no aged care facilities, not Canberra, Gungahlin has no aged care facilities. 2, as you exactly point out, the employment that arises from such a centre would be fantastic. And 3, it also really encourages those relationships and contacts to be maintained, because people can easily, as they're coming through the town centre to either shop or for commute for work, they can easily stop, see the person inside the aged care facilities and be able to maintain that connection. Finally, there's also the medical facilities here in terms of x-rays, doctors and other medical services that will be available on hand for such a facility. The challenge I've been hitting up against is, to be in a town centre, it would need to be vertical, it would need to be multiple stories. And there seems to have been just a misunderstanding, or just, it's not the usual model the industry employs for operating such a facility. They usually have flat single-story facilities where you can drive up to quite easily. So it's been sort of, I won't say there's been resistance, but it's just a bit of inertia in terms of people being slow to conceive what it could look like.
Well, Andrew, I live in a high rise, and there was the best thing I ever did was throw away the lawnmower and look downstairs and see someone else pushing it round. There are the people who live in high rise in ILUs think it's fantastic. So I don't agree that there is resistance, because I live in one.
So this is I think a great conversation.
I'm not saying resistance from the residents. I'm saying resistance probably more from the industry, particularly for residential aged care. And so that's something I'm just going to have to slowly work with the industry to try and encourage them to come and build in town centre.
Andrew, Peter Kane or anyone else, do we have an aged care minister of the ACT? And why do I not know that?
It's the Minister for Seniors, which is Emma Davidson.
Emma. Oh. Okay. Well, I guess that's one place, I suppose. But yeah, look, I mean, this is, I think, a really good case study to develop as part of the consultation that the SLA will have around a couple of, models of, well, maybe we need to orient towards this opportunity and see what happens. I mean, certainly I know there'll be a lot of pressure around commercial value of land and all of that, but we'll have to explore that. I think that's a really obvious and good topic. And for those of us who've got parents just entering in or going through that aged care journey, I get it. I totally get it. Looking for hands. Ashley, welcome back.
Hi, excuse the audio, but I'm standing in a corridor in the hotel I'm in for a few weeks while I'm back in town. So good to see the familiar faces and see the meeting online. Sorry about the comment problems being on Facebook. I think the point that, was it Lynn made, Kim? Got to check the name, Lynn made, was a really good one, and it goes in with the comment that I made that as a federal government worker now, work from home has changed my life, where I now live on a little island, and the only thing that really mattered to me was good internet. I've had bosses say that they never would have believed that they could have got an honest day's work out of all of their team working from home permanently, and they've been forced to change. So that's changed the nature of federal government. The office that I'm domiciled out of has 38 desks, and we have 120 staff now linked to that office. There's absolutely no push from my agency to expand the office space. They are conceding that they are not going to need to renegotiate new leases to expand office space. They are conceding that the majority of us will continue to work from home after the pandemic. So with that in mind, I mean, we all, Kevin, Peter, we all pushed so hard to get officers in against the scourge of the Canberra Airport and Brindabella Park and that. But I do think we all have to admit those days are gone now. The chance of getting a mega office there the last one was the ACT government, one shared services, and it's not really going to change so much. But I think, Peter, what you said about mid-range offices and shared office facilities, things that cater to services for work from homers. There are always times when working from home doesn't work. That's why I'm standing in a corridor at the moment, because my partner's in the middle of a Zoom meeting with her programming team overseas. So where there are facilities and those sort of things where you can have a semi-office environment, but also, all those people that aren't going into the cafes down here in the city right now are still wanting to go into cafes near where they live. So if you can have that sort of thing, I've got friends who lived over the road from me in Harrison that are getting their coffees delivered by drones now. Because the suburbs don't have enough local shops and things in them, scattered through the suburbs, the little shops, the two-hander kind of things. But in the town centre, I think that what you were saying, Peter, about the mixed-use commercial tenancies being restricted to such a small amount, I think that's the big issue. If you actually allow them to bump up, you can have some quite decent businesses. And what Lynn said about aged care in situ. I mean, we've got the wonderful health centre there in the town centre. When you've got everything within easy walking distance, it's an ideal alternative commercial base. And the big thing about getting the offices was to put workers into the town centre to support businesses. If you can put aged care people in, that's a good alternative too, vertical aged care. I'll sort of wind up there. I'm in support of what you're saying. We're just looking for the right mix.
Yep. Yeah. Look, that really goes back to this creativity theme of just exploring other ways of making Gungahlin a destination. And I'm not expecting it to be a tourist destination, although maybe we could explore that. But the point is, how do we? It's all about people. How do we get people to be retailing and interacting and coming here? Otherwise, we have 20,000 people heading south or to the rest of Canberra every day, and no one coming north, and vice versa, and in the evening, and it just seems crazy. But yeah, look, I agree, and part of this is being able to have a big conversation. When you're in trouble when you're trying to fix problems of this scale, and you're arguing about rules and clauses in a precinct planning code, and where can we have the big conversations? The government's split up across portfolios that are incredibly fragmented, so it gets hard. But thank you for your contributions, and I hope you enjoy your corridor. Okay, look, it's been a lively evening, and good to have some free-form conversation and commentary. Does anyone else have anything to say or any comments to make?
Peter, I think there's one message on the chat.
Yep, good.
Yeah, it's regarding the hospital, which we've been emphasizing on for a while. So I think if you can quote that comment, that'd be good to close up.
Yeah, look, I actually noticed that. I think some people will know that the ACT government is conducting a review of Northside hospitals, and there are a whole bunch of options there. Continue with what they're doing at Calvary, build more at Calvary, or build an entirely new hospital are some of the things that have been floated. I just checked the website, and apparently that consultancy was meant to be completed in 2020, and I've not heard anything. So I've sent a note off to hopefully someone, and we'll see what comes back. But I don't think we would ever get a hospital in Gungahlin itself, but getting one close to Gungahlin, or somewhere between Gungahlin and Belconnen, that might make a lot of sense, given the weight of people. But certainly we would be advocating for that, to get that sort of company. We advocated for the low intensity hospital that eventually ended up at the University of Canberra. So that was not to be, again, possibly due to land pricing. Darren.
I just wanted to touch on that frenzy Yarrabee that you were talking about a minute ago. There are some things that are happening around Yarrabee. There's obviously those scoping studies in regards to looking at a replacement of the toilet facilities. They're also looking at a wide-ranging sort of lighting survey. to see what lights could be put up. But as Andrew correctly pointed out, they haven't really included the skate park there. And the kids that are down there are obviously mentioning about the fact that if they could have lights down there and incorporated into that survey, that would be really great. The other thing that I'll mention to Andrew as well that maybe you know about in relation to the pedal power is about the jumps that are behind there, that there was some conversation about looking at setting up a group or some conversation about how that might be addressed and reset up. So, I mean, if the conversation is about the lighting that's there, we also got to look at the investment in that skate park. And the skate park investment that was there was about 200 and something thousand in comparison to, say, Tuggeranong, for example, was around 700 to 800,000 that I looked at from Hansard. So there's been a lot of significant investment also in Belconnen as well. If you have a look at the Belconnen skate park, it's massive in comparison to Gungahlin. And here we're pretty much the nappy belt of Canberra, and this is where the youth is. So, I mean, it really makes a lot of sense to be really advocating about whether or not that skate park is really sort of due for some investment. And it wasn't that long ago during COVID that money was actually allocated to Belconnen to build a new half pipe that was there. So, I mean, they've already got great facilities there, and they continue to get more funding sort of, and I don't, take away from that. I think it's great that they get funding. I just always putting forward that the equitable sort of funding that maybe it's time for Gungahlin, a bit like what we talk about when the Friends of Yarrabee Pond about the investment in Yarrabee Pond, that maybe it's time after the Tuggeranong foreshore upgrade and many millions of dollars that have been invested there recently, that maybe, Gungahlin might be due for a bit of a facelift and some investment. And I think that that's starting to happen in some ways. But as I said, that skate park, I think really, I think is a good thing that Andrew's advocating there to get some more funding for that.
Look, I think it's brilliant. Just on the jumps there, I'm also a member of Pedal Power, and we've been working to look at perhaps redoing the jumps area to make it more sustainable, perhaps targeting it at a broader community of riders by moving it to a pump track or a beginner's cross-country trying to trail experience. But it's part of another engagement we've got running. This is we, Paddle Power, not we, the Community Council. We're also looking at establishing some mountain bike trails in Gungahlin. So there's no, in Majura Pines and Bruce Ridge are many kilometres ride from Gungahlin. So if anyone's actually interested in mountain bike trails, then I would encourage them to get in touch with me or Greg Berry from Pedal Power. We've already started looking at potential sites. We found locations sort of in that area between Moncrief and Amaroo, so the south of where the tennis centre will be. That's maybe a possibility. If anyone's got any interest, talk to us. But it's the same arguments. We've got 85,000 people. We're one of the largest districts in the ACT, and we're just underserved facilities. We just need to keep advocating and pursuing that. And it would be great if we had some sort of strategy that could identify that, yes, that's understood that we're missing things, and this year we'll do this, and next year we'll do that. But at the moment, it seems like every bubbler, every skate park, every silt filter seems to be a separate battle, and it's hard work. It's hard work. All right,
Peter.
Yeah.
Can I catch up with you to discuss those ideas about the mountain bike trails and so forth with your Pedal Power hat at some point? Because that's something I'd be interested in pursuing.
Yeah,
on behalf
sure.
of the community.
Sure.
And in response to your comments, Darren, totally agreed. The Gungahlin Skate Park, let's face it, was built in the 90s to match the population that was probably in the Gungahlin region at that time. We've definitely far surpassed the number of people that had been planned for in the Gungahlin region. And now it's time that we actually got a skate park to reflect the size of that population and a number of young people who need to, who are looking for outdoors exercise like that.
Cool. All right, Ashley, you still got your hand up, or are you?
Yep. Yeah, just very briefly, just on Yarrabee. Darren, I've had people reaching out to me recently from Yarrabee about the parking, the original plans that were done up by Roads ACT back in whatever it was, 2008 or something, and nothing's happened still. Have you got any updates on any of that?
Yeah, well, we actually went back in the history and looked at the fact that the government had actually already did some preliminary studies, and they had plans ready to go, and they announced them at the GCC, and they showed what they were planning on doing, and then something happened, and I read into it, and apparently there were priorities, but the priorities weren't high on their agenda to actually implement any funding. And this odd 300,000 that was in the budget that was allocated to Yarrabee Pond, we felt was probably supposed to be sort of spent on that parking, because apparently the quote was that was what it would cost in order to put that parking up. But that was about supporting the businesses in that local area, and we've really put the case forward that a lot of those businesses really have left because, you know, depending on what type of business you have, might rely on the fact that you need parking in that area. But we wanted a holistic parking survey that really looked at the whole of Yarrabee Ponds as well, because the parking's not great down near where the children's playgrounds are. When we try to have events there, they're always full. One of the things that I looked at was there were some vans and things that were down there trying to sell coffee and so forth, and they were actually taking up car park spaces as well as having to use, you know, diesel generators. And one of the things that we tried to do was to just advocate on their behalf to see whether they could get access to Yarrabee Ponds and not have to use those parking spaces. But, you know, we really want long term for the parking holistically to be looked at. There are some residents that also I have to really draw attention to that are also concerned, because they don't just want that whole area being sort of cemented and for it to be one big car park. And one of the things that I think we've got to look at is that I think the government is actually now tendering for some companies to actually start looking at the parking issue there, and to try and come up with maybe some solutions that we can go forward and actually finally address that issue that's been going on for a very long time.
Yeah, good, thank you. Because yeah, you did right. If there was no parking back then. And I'm sure it's a whole lot worse with almost 90,000 residents there now, because the park itself is such a draw card. But businesses can't exist if the people have got nowhere to park.
And it's exacerbated by issues that you probably be well aware of, is there's not enough parking for residents in those areas, particularly in the surrounding suburb. You see the people are all parked on the side of the roads, and a lot of people were getting parking fines associated with the fact that there was no parking. So people were getting penalised on top of that. So a solution needs to be found. But I will say that I have had advocacy from some residents there that also don't want to see a blanket big slab of concrete put there as well. They obviously want to see some sort of, give and take in regards to the environmental sort of aspects of that area.
It was only meant to be about the bottom half, not the entire park all the way up the hill.
I think that's what they're scared of, that essentially that the government will just go ahead. And I don't think the government would do that. I think that, that they really want to try and get something that feeds in with the natural ambience of the area. But that's what the study is there for at the moment. And hopefully we can get some people from the general public who can actually contribute to some of these surveys and studies, because sometimes that's our biggest gripe is that sometimes they just sort of don't really talk to the general public and get real opinions of the local population and people that visit the area. And that's really what we're trying to concentrate on, that whatever they do come about actually addresses community concerns, whatever they might be.
Good work. Thanks, Darren.
No worries.
An excellent note to conclude on, trying to capture the community needs and wants and getting them actioned. Thank you all for your engagement tonight, and it's been a lively evening. I hope it's given everyone a few thoughts and some ideas around how they can get engaged. I've certainly appreciated the feedback everyone's provided, and look forward to the next meeting, where hopefully we'll have a bit more about roads and all the usual things everyone loves. Thanks very much. Good night all. Have a great evening.